My thoughts on Michael Manley, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica. But first, let me say this. I have never been a member or a supporter of any political party, mainly because I see partisan politics as one of the most destructive forces to be unleashed upon humanity. As a citizen of a country, I am obligated to respect and obey the laws of the country. It is my civic duty to vote according to my conscience and not along party lines. I try very hard not to get embrangled in partisan political dialogues and criticisms of one party over another. Because when you feed energy into the negative, reverberating influences of partisan politics, all you do is divide the people and put them in a state of antagonism against each other. Yes, there must be opposition, but the opposition should be constructive and only act in the interest of the country and the people. When criticisms are leveled by one party against another, solely for political expediencies and opportunities, the end result is usually chaos, division, and even violence. During the years of Michael Manley's political career, as a young radical, I was never one of his followers, nor was I a follower of any political protagonist. I did admire, and to a certain extent, morally supported Manley's vision for an egalitarian system and a more equitable distribution of the national resources of our country. I admired his zest for free education for all and the need to eliminate the systems which supported and enhanced only the privileged and the affluent. Though we may have had a similar or parallel social vision, I did not share his confidence and optimism that the Jamaican people were ready to embrace his vision of democratic socialism. I was very ambivalent about how effective what Manley wanted to do would play out in the long run. Still, I liked his commitment and the afflatus he displayed, trying to bring about the somewhat unpopular social revolution, which he believed was in the interest of the academic and economic advancement of the country. Jamaica, a country freshly emerging from the clutches of colonialism, which had controlled its economic resources and to a very large extent the minds of his people, was without question in a state of flux and in what Manley described as a state of dependent psychology. Though we were one of the most radical countries in the Caribbean to aggressively establish its freedom from colonialism, the minds of the proletariat were still inebriated by the many years of brainwashing under colonial rule. They could not vividly discern that we were now adumbrated by the shadow of neocolonialism masquerading under the guise of independence. Manley's thinking was too advanced for many of his followers to understand, and too revolutionary for the ruling class to be comfortable with. The panic alarm sounded when he tried to maximize the revenues which Jamaica received from the bauxite companies. The imperialist minds screamed foul and made false claims of impending nationalization and a communist takeover. In that period in Jamaica's history, the term democratic socialism translated into one meaning: communism. That understanding had nothing to do with reality or facts. It was solely the result of a pervasive mental conditioning backed by aggressive propaganda. I honestly do not believe even today that Manley was a communist. I believe that his intentions were good, but his vision at the time somewhat lacked pragmatism, and his concept of its practical application and acceptance was seemingly very nebulous. When Manley started diplomatic relations with Cuba, this angered the United States, a country with an inordinate fear of communism. His refusal to cut ties with Castro was interpreted as defiance to Henry Kissinger, the then American Secretary of State. This was a time when Manley needed to be sagacious enough to be able to negotiate between a noble ideal and the welfare of his people. The Jamaican economy went into a tailspin. There was a shortage of foreign exchange. The price of oil rose by almost 400%. There was a shortage of basic food items like rice, sugar, flour, milk, detergent, and saltfish. These conditions created social unrest and violence. The fact that other insidious forces were at work against him meant nothing to the people. They were more concerned about their own welfare and the social challenges facing them. Many began to see democratic socialism exactly as the opponents of Manley wanted them to see it: bad for Jamaica and would ruin the country. Manley himself liked to talk about the dangers of promises, the promises of politics. When they're not fulfilled, using his own words, the people will chew you up and spit you out, as they did to him in 1980. Manley's three gravest mistakes were his overestimation of the capacity of his support base, his underestimation of the power of the ruling class, and the determination of the world's most powerful hegemony to subdue smaller nations it considered to be a threat. When he decided to engage in an ideological war with the United States, an ideological war which was not supported internationally, regionally, or locally, it was a war Jamaica was sure to lose, especially because of its weak economy, which could so easily be manipulated to bring the country to its knees. Another problem Manley had was that the opposition was able to corrupt his own social vision and fed it back to the masses in a negative way much more effectively than he could articulate his own vision with convincing clarity, taking it out of the arena of obscurity and ambiguity. I did not doubt Manley's sincerity, that he wanted the best for Jamaica, that he wanted to see an enlightened nation where economic affluence did not trammel the will of or block the path to opportunity from the less economically fortunate. When he lost the elections in 1980, I believe it was the best thing for the Jamaican economy. Had Manley won the elections, an aggressive political sabotage would have been unleashed upon his government and Jamaica would have totally collapsed. The foreign exchange situation was so bad that people going overseas on holidays could only legally take $50 out of the country. People were in dire need for food and basic necessities of life. Many were fleeing from the island as if it was under attack by a foreign enemy. I left Jamaica in 1982. My leaving had nothing to do with the social conditions. I left when the country was under the government of Edward Seaga, a time when the threat of communism was supposed to be over and Jamaica was once again free. After leaving Jamaica, I did not continue to follow the politics of the island. When I returned 12 years later, I had lost all interest in politics. One interesting observation is that though Manley was vilified and labeled a threat to Caribbean democracy, in 1989, the Jamaican people re-elected the People's National Party under the leadership of Michael Manley. This article was not intended to praise or castigate Michael Manley. It is merely my thoughts of how I perceived the man. My interest in Michael Manley was purely intellectual, I was fascinated by the agility of his mind, the clarity of his flawless and always lucid oratory. Like all men, he had strengths and many weaknesses. And like him or not, there is no doubt that Michael Manley was one of the most influential, controversial, and charismatic politicians the Caribbean had ever seen. He will be remembered very differently and for very different reasons for a very long time.